Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. When we talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on this podcast and elsewhere, and the plight of the millions of Palestinians caught in that conflict whose lives are limited and dictated by restrictions and checkpoints, we tend to be using our head and not our heart. Sari Bashi, an American-Israeli journalist turned human rights activist, co-founded an organization called Gisha to help Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank overcome Israel's web of restrictions and regulations. When she founded that group, she had no idea she would end up falling in love with one of her clients, a Gazan Palestinian living in Ramallah, and that the rules and regulations of the occupation that she battled every day on behalf of her clients would end up affecting her own life so deeply. Bashi, over the years, has written columns about her complicated life in Haaretz, and now she's published a book called Upside Down Love. Her book, written diary style, tells the story of her and her now husband and their complicated love story, which resulted in the life she lives today, crossing between two worlds, the West Bank, where the couple live with their two children, and Tel Aviv, where she continues her work in the human rights field, currently as the executive director of the Public Committee Against Torture. My conversation with Sari about her life, her love, her work, and her new book is coming up.
I'm Esther Solomon, Editor-in-Chief of Haaretz English. Around the world, the fight is on to preserve critical and independent media. Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, upholds its long tradition of accurate, committed, and incisive journalism, refusing to bend its reporting to pressure from any government or leader. A digital subscription to Haaretz gives you up-to-the-minute news and analysis in English from journalists who live Israel's reality and are committed to covering the Middle East and its global repercussions. At the same time, your subscription supports the cause of a free press that holds the powerful to account in Israel and around the world. I invite you to become a subscriber to Haaretz now. Just go to Haaretz.com and use the code Haaretz10, that's Haaretz with the number 10, for 10% off an annual subscription.
Sari Bashi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Sari, you are a Jewish, Israeli, American of Iraqi descent, correct? And your new book, Upside Down Love, chronicles in detail your love story with your partner, who is named in the book. It's a pseudonym, Osama Fahed, a Palestinian born in Gaza who lived in Ramallah when you met. The idea of powerful love against all odds, overcoming obstacles to be together is very romanticized. But your book, to me, helped me understand the very practical and unromantic aspects of doing something like this. We'll get to your chronology of your story in a minute, but do you see yourself as someone who you believed would sign up for this kind of a challenging life?
Absolutely not. And by the way, I think checkpoint love is very romantic. Thank you very much. No, I mean, when I met Osama, it was overwhelming. It was impossible. It was crazy. And I think my first thought, one of my earlier thoughts was, this is never going to work, but I'm going to have this adventure for as long as I can.
Talk to us about how you met.
So I was his lawyer. I'm a co-founder of Gisha, which is an Israeli human rights group that provides legal assistance to folks from Gaza who need permits in order to travel. So when I met Osama, he was trapped in the West Bank city of Ramallah, trapped because he was originally from Gaza. The address on his Israeli-approved ID card still said Gaza, and he was afraid to leave the greater Ramallah area for fear that if he tried to cross a checkpoint, a soldier would see his address and remove him to Gaza by force.
This is in the mid-2000s, right?
Yes, I met him in 2006. He'd been trapped for 6 years. And he would lose his son, his job, his wife at the time, his house, everything. So he'd been accepted to a doctoral program, both in Israel as well as in the UK, but he couldn't go because he was trapped. So I represented him. I filed a court petition. We reached a settlement with the state where he was allowed to leave for the UK and then come back at the end of his studies. And when he came back, he had already separated from his wife. wife. So we met to talk about his case, and then we started talking about the sea and poetry and lots of other things.
You came to Israel, in quotes, made aliyah, which is the ideological ascent to Israel as a young adult. Obviously, you're a co-founder of Gisha after you went through law school and clerkships, kind of in mainstream Israel. When did you decide to devote your career to activism, to advocating for Palestinians? And was it just a natural meeting of your professional orientation and your personal interests that you were open to this kind of an unusual personal story?
Well, I didn't make Aliyah either technically or ideologically, in the sense that I had Israeli citizenship through my father. He was from Iraq, but he'd grown up in Tel Aviv. And it also ideologically wasn't that kind of step. I think that I'd always been curious. I'd been to Israel a lot for family visits. And when I finished my university degree in the U.S., I came here and worked as a journalist. When I was working as a journalist, this was the late 1990s, I saw conduct by the Israeli authorities that troubled me. And I wanted an opportunity not just to write about it in a reporting way, but also to take a stand against it. And that's really when I started my human rights career.
And you went to law school in order to pursue it?
Yes. Yeah.
When did you realize and how did you realize that your relationship with Osama was crossing a client-lawyer divide? And did you have ethical and other concerns about it, given your status?
Oh my God, I had every single concern you can imagine. So it was that one meeting where I felt such strong feelings for him. And we started emailing at first about his case, but then about other things as well. And I started to feel like maybe it was mutual. And it was really overwhelming. First of all, I was his lawyer, so there were very big ethical concerns about that. And actually what I did pretty early on is transfer his representation to another lawyer, just to try to, that was the one power dynamic I could do something about. The other kinds of power dynamics were beyond my control. It was very confusing for both of us, both because of the overwhelming social taboos, and it was also literally illegal for us to meet up together.
You said that this book was some kind of a therapy or some way of getting through the relationship, that you were sort of chronicling it as it went along?
I was feeling such strong feelings, and I couldn't tell anybody, so I started writing. And it turned out that he started writing a bit too. And at a certain point, we were exchanging not letters, but there were times when we found it hard to talk to each other. And so the book incorporates some communication that we actually wrote to each other in real time, and then other things that I wrote later on.
Yeah, it has very short chapters back and forth between your perspective and his perspective. Tell me about dating when you are a Jewish Israeli with full privileges living in Tel Aviv, and you have fallen in love with someone who is essentially trapped in Ramallah. How does that work?
So your mind explodes at least 3 times a day. The transitions between Ramallah and Tel Aviv are impossible. They're such different worlds in so many different ways. And as a Jewish Israeli, I have privilege that he didn't have. And that was really hard for both of us, but maybe especially for him. I could run for kilometers. I'm a long distance runner. I could run for kilometers inside Israel, in Palestine. I could travel. I could move through checkpoints and boundaries. And he was trapped in a city. And that kind of imbalance repeatedly almost broke us apart. There's a scene in the book where I describe a trip we took to Wadi Kelt, which is like a hike in the southern West Bank, where it started out as a nice hike with beautiful waterfalls. And then as we encountered more and more settlers with guns, it became apparent that I had an identity and a language that was common with the people who terrified him. And it actually did break us up a number of times until we figured it out.
And yet you felt comfortable when you were with him in Ramallah, and continuation, you live today in the West Bank. You never felt that kind of discomfort on the other side?
No, that was maybe even harder for me. I didn't know who to be in Ramallah. I remember early on when I was visiting him when we were first dating, and it was Passover. So I came for a long visit and I brought matzah. And one of his friends entered the kitchen and saw on the counter a package of matzah. And he said, "Oh, I remember those. We used to eat those in prison with chocolate spread." And I thought, oh my God, my religion reminds him of an Israeli prison. But it was like that over and over again because my identity was threatening to people. And so in the beginning, I was silent. I didn't know who to be.
Has it gotten harder over the years because sort of the trend of anti-normalization, not having normal human interactions and relationships with Israeli because that is somehow justifying the occupation, has become much more of a trend in Palestinian society and in pro-Palestinian circles? Have you found that an obstacle to becoming part of life in the West Bank?
I think what's been harder has just been the overwhelming security deterioration. So, I mean, I always walked around concerned. But, I mean, as you know, things have been quite bad. And so that got harder. For my own self, it got easier because what was hard was that uncertainty and also the fragility of my relationship with him. And once he and I solidified as a couple, and I learned a little bit more how to do my life, it became easier. And now, particularly after our kids were born, I made it a point to tell people where I could who I am, to get it over with. And it's easier that way. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't like it, but they usually don't share that with me, which is fine.
Sort of a universal coming out of the closet experience for people that, it's a huge relief when you finally tell the truth.
Yeah.
You mentioned your children. The book has your relationship basically foundering on the issue of having children. You wanted them, you knew you wanted them, and he hesitated and did not, and that's why you broke up a few times. Now that you have them and you are raising them in the West Bank as Palestinian Jews, do you understand your husband's hesitation more to bring children into this complicated and strange world existence between the two worlds? If you knew then what you knew now, would you do it all over again?
Yeah, it's a great question. And absolutely, yes. I mean, it started out really when our daughter was born because she was born preterm. So she was hospitalized for a month and he couldn't come. And that was exactly what he was afraid about. He was afraid of having a child that he couldn't protect. He couldn't even come see her. So he was right, but I was right too.
Tell us about your children now. How old are they? What kind of a school do they go to? What are their feelings about their extremely mixed identities?
So they're 11 and 8, and they go to a private school in the West Bank. Like many private schools, the language of instruction is both Arabic and English. I think the way they relate to their identity changes quickly, as everything changes quickly with children. So when they were younger, it was a lot more fluid. My son could start a sentence in English, continue in Hebrew, and finish in Arabic. Now they're much more aware of the taboos around those different languages and those different identities. And so what I can see them do is engage more in a process of trying to assert who they are. And I think it'll change probably 1,000,000 times before they become adults.
Do they feel comfortable when they cross over and spend time in Hebrew, speaking Israel, doing Israeli things? Can your partner now join them when they come to Israel?
Usually he can't. And the truth is we go to Israel less frequently because with the travel restrictions, it takes a very, very, very long time, even if you're somebody like me who can drive back and forth. But I mean, my kids, I think that they do feel comfortable code switching. But I think as my daughter in particular, who's older, becomes more aware, her approach to things Israeli is more reserved and more cautious, in particular because she sees the other side of what the Israeli government, what Israeli settlers are doing to people she knows. Even we go through checkpoints and she knows the people that I'm tense about are Israeli soldiers.
And so how do they define themselves? What do they consider themselves Palestinians? They consider themselves Jewish Palestinians? What's their, they consider themselves Americans. They also have American citizenship. Where does their identity lie, or that's all still in process because they're young?
It's all in process. I mean, they have my status, which is they have dual Israeli and U.S. citizenship. And we consider them, my partner and I consider them mixed, and they get to figure it out. There's one really good thing, though, which is that, as you may know, in Jewish tradition, a religion goes according to the mother, and in Muslim tradition, it goes according to the father. So my mother and his mother are thrilled because my mom knows they're Jewish, his mom knows they're Muslim, and the grandmothers are happy.
So again, you're a professional, basically human rights activist. You co-founded Gisha. And now you've recently begun as the executive director of the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel. I'm wondering, Gisha, basically you had to make sense of this Kafkaesque web of restrictions and regulations in order to advocate for Palestinians who wanted access in and out of Israel, from the Gaza to the West Bank, vice versa. how did your perspective on all of these rules and regulations change when you began experiencing themselves and not only advising and working with people who had to go through it?
It made me feel a lot more vulnerable because in the past, I could come in as a lawyer in a safe place and help others. And then all of a sudden, I certainly have a lot of privilege that the Palestinians don't have, but I'm also afraid of settler attacks. I'm also worried about going through checkpoints. And the kinds of travel restrictions, for example, that hit Palestinians endanger the man I love. So I think it became much more personal for me. It also gave me a much deeper understanding of how to try to make the legal work more responsive to the needs of Palestinian communities, just because I was more sensitive to how things are perceived. And I can say that the individual legal assistance is really important. It gives people a little bit of relief.
How have things changed in that area since October 7th?
Very badly. Gaza is almost entirely closed. Gisha, I'm no longer in the organization, but they're now limited to, trying to get people out for medical care or sometimes getting people who have either West Bank or Israeli IDs out of Gaza. But other kinds of travel are very, very, very hard. And the movement of goods into and out of Gaza is extremely restricted. And in my new hat, the level of torture has never been this bad. The Public Committee Against Torture has been around for 36 years, and it has never been this bad. It's systematic, it's routine, and it's brutal.
There's been talk of the Gazification of the West Bank, that people are behaving as they were in an active war status in Gaza, sort of bringing those low standards to the treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank. Is that what you've observed?
Yes, absolutely. I can't say that we see that much of a difference between the way detainees from Gaza and detainees from the West Bank are being treated. It's just Palestinians are being routinely subjected to mistreatment and torture.
So in these positions, in these roles, you've decided basically to become public. First, you wrote this book in Hebrew. The book was published in Hebrew, and now it's being published in English. At one point, you wrote for Haaretz, first anonymously, right, under a pseudonym. I remember your columns. You called yourself Furat, the mother of Furat, your eldest daughter. And then you came out of the closet. So I'm curious why you are willing to be so public about this, why you are showing the world, your difficult, conflicted existence. I'm sure in some ways it probably makes your work harder and not easier. I mean, it's still scary, and I'm still not sure I made the right decision. And I would say for two reasons. First of all, to write personally, to write memoir or a blog is always risky because you're putting yourself out there, and even worse, you're writing about the people you love. And maybe you've agreed to come out there, but nobody asked to be in your blog or your book. So that's hard. But I mean, as you know, I live in a place that's not particularly safe. And so the risks are much greater. It was important to me to do it because I thought particularly Israeli readers might be able to relate to my story in a different way. So my hope in writing the book in Hebrew, for example, was that people who may not choose to read about the occupation, maybe they'd be interested in a crazy love story. And in the process of getting involved in the characters' lives, they would see what life is like in the West Bank. And I have similar goals for the English version. What was the reaction when it was published in Hebrew in 2021? So it was a different time. I don't know that it would even be published in Israel today, just because of how difficult the current environment is. But it was well received. I mean, small. It was an independent publisher. But there were a lot of people who appreciated seeing a different side. And I think to some extent, my voice was a bridge for Israeli readers to be able to access Osama's voice in the chapters that are written like from his perspective. And that was my hope, that people would be able to connect in a human way and maybe ask some questions about their assumptions, particularly about Palestinians. Does your partner run into professional problems, issues, social issues, because he's married to a Jewish Israeli American? And I'm also interested in how your families have been, how your families have reacted to your choices. Well, I don't think it's helped his career. But I mean, look, it's also something he has to deal with. I think for the most part, the people who don't like it don't share that with us, which is very fine with us. And we know it's a factor. And for our families, I mean, I think there's been an evolution among many different family members. I think for some family members, it was really hard.
And, some of them are trying. They're really trying, and that's all you can ask. And some of them are not trying, and that's a shame.
I mean, you say the book couldn't have been published now. After October 7th, all people talk about is dehumanization of the other side. And your book is so human. It goes into so many details. Your long distance running, what it's like to run in and out of the Palestinian villages and the settlements, about loving the sea, especially about food. You make this comparison to the Palestinian dish maklouba, which is an upside down rice dish, which you turn the pot upside down, and you talk about your upside down life. Do you think that you and your partner could have fallen in love and made this life in a world after October 7th?
I think technically no, because I would not have been able to come visit him in the way that I was able to at the time, in the sense that the security tensions would have been so high that we just wouldn't have been able to see each other. And we needed a little bit of luck. It was hard, but we needed it to be easy enough that I could actually be with him face to face. And I think now it would have been too much.
Power dynamics are hard with regular couples. Living under occupation, it must be so different when you're here, again, dividing your life between the West Bank and Tel Aviv, Israel. I mean, aren't things simpler when you're abroad? I know you've left for periods and lived abroad. And I'm kind of amazed that you guys are choosing to live here split between the West Bank and Israel. And we speak at a time when many, many people we know, Palestinians and Israelis alike, are basically giving up and leaving, and they live in circumstances way more comfortable than yours. What keeps you here?
I mean, it was definitely a relief, the time we spent in South Africa, the time we spent in the United States. It was a relief not to be interesting. We could drive the same car. It was like ordinary things were really nice. For me, I want to be part of the fight for justice here. And for me, I have privilege that makes my life pretty good. If and when it becomes too hard, either for my partner or our kids, then we'll reconsider. But I've been able to protect my children in ways that other Israeli parents have not been able to. So I know, and I think you know, a lot of people who've left because they don't want their kids to be drafted into the army. My kids will never be drafted. I found a creative way to protect them from that. And that's a big deal.
But also many Palestinians, fleeing the occupation, not wanting to live under this web of restrictions, they're also leaving as well. So it's also, I presume, your partner's decision to stay in the West Bank and not go for a much more comfortable life abroad?
For now, we never say never.
Well, that's what we do in this region, right? We never say never about anything. Sari Bashi, the book is Upside Down Love. It is really a beautiful love story and extremely readable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for writing the book, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Sari Bashi, and to producer and editor, Adi Shacham. If you want to continue to listen to our podcast and make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave a comment and a 5-star rating, and that way more people can find us. And to keep up with all of the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.